Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Otherwise, just say something in the chat. Yes, thank you, Max. I'm here for the PDF Association. PDF Association is a place where PDF is being standardized, where it's developed for the future. And yeah, the title of this presentation, this short presentation, is Current Plans for HDR and PDF. We've heard so many things about new technologies, quite impressive what HDR can do in PDF. Or at the PDF Association, we are still working on introducing HDR. And that is because PDF always was a reliable place. So, and in the PDF specification, we also want to specify how PDFs are processed. So while PDF should always deliver the best possible impression on what's in the PDF file, we also need to take into account reliability. And in this particular environment, so where we are working on print, we also have to consider that PDF is the format that not just links all media to printing machines, it is also the format that is used for soft proofing. So, and then in my presentation, I want to first provide you with a short status of what is today. So what does HDR in PDF mean as of today? And then, as I've said, so we are just in the middle of working on introducing HDR into PDF. I have a couple of questions that we still need to answer before we can say PDF by now also covers HDR, and then I have a short outlook into what's coming in the future. So first, and this is a slide here, where do we stand today? PDF is a file format, 1,000 pages of specification, but it's also a container format that can have other files in it. So, and in this context, most importantly, a PDF file has images in it, and then it has images in various formats. So JPEG images, JPEG 2000 images are there, and we heard and we know these images as of today already can have HDR information. So when I say there is no support for HDR in PDF, that is actually not really true. You can have images in a PDF file that have HDR information. And in addition, you also in a PDF file use ICC profiles embedded, and the same applies here. So ICC profiles can have CICP tags. They can be then associated with an image in a PDF file. So you have HDR information in a PDF file, even today. But, and that's the next bullet here, normally they are ignored. So that means I have an image with HDR, and we've seen in the previous presentations, your display may use that HDR if there is headroom and it gives you a very nice exposure with illuminant sun or some light in it. But when you convert it to PDF, that is gone, and then you're back to the SDR range of colors. That is not fully clear in the PDF specification, but that is specified in the subset standards for PDF. So PDF-A for archiving, PDF-X for what we use in printing. They specifically say that you must not use that HDR information. And then we, the PDF Association, published an FAQ document on that also specifies that. What does HDR in PDF means when it comes to PDF-A and PDF-X. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then, as I've said, so what is happening today? We are working on introducing HDR to PDF. And that is all happening in the imaging model, TWG, and yeah, happy to invite you. So if you want to join us there as a member of the PDF Association, please do so. We are not just working on HDR there. There are also other image formats. I've mentioned JPEG and JPEG 2000. We are now currently working on JPEG XL to introduce that into PDF. Another topic that is important for our print industry is N-channel and transparency, so multicolor color spaces where spot colors are not really used as spot colors more, but as process colors, like such as in the CMYK OVG color space. And then there are variable width fonts. And all these things are new. They are not currently specified in PDF. And when we introduce that, we always have to consider whether we want to break PDF, meaning introduce something that then couldn't be displayed by current applications. That hasn't happened in the past. It may be necessary at some point in the future, but if we do so, I think we all understand that has to be happen in a very careful manner. So then let's move on to the questions. So introducing HDR, we have heard so many things, what's going on, new developments, interesting thing, how get the most of the data that you have and the display that you have. How can you bring that together to provide the best possible experience? But in PDF, we also have to think about, it has to be the same experience, somehow the same experience on every device that you're using, whatever operating system you're working with whatever monitor you're working with. And then in order to make that happen, we have to look into a few questions. So first, what data structures do we want to have in PDF? What does HDR mean for vector graphics? That probably is the most interesting question here. Do we want to have HDR for vector graphics? I've already mentioned subset standards, PDF-A, PDF-X, and then CMYK and transparency. So let's have a short look into these areas, just briefly explaining the type of questions that we need to answer without wanting to provide answers in this presentation. These answers have still to be given and agreed on in the community. So first, we've heard that images already can have HDR information, same for ICC profiles. You can have that already in a PDF file. The first question is, do we want to copy that information into the PDF specification itself? So do we want to have a gain map information for an image, not just in the image, but also in the PDF specification in the part that is specified for PDF, CICP tag information, and adaptive gain curve. So these are the most important blocks of information related to HDR. Do we want to copy that information into the PDF specification? And if so, and if both are present, so I have an image with HDR and I have HDR in the PDF, which one will win? So this is an open question as of today, both possible. An advantage of just relying on what is in the image or in the ICC profile is you're always where the technology and where the developments are, but on the PDF side, then you have everything under control. So next slide, please. And that is when it comes to PDF as a container format, that is the most important question, I think. So in PDF as a container format, we heard so many things about images today, but in PDF, vector graphics is as important as an image. And then you may say, okay, but if I have the image, I don't care so much about vector graphics, but you often in PDF have a combination of the two. And as of today, there isn't much work has happened on HDR for vector graphics. In PDF, you may easily have an image in the background, in the foreground, some white text in front of the image. And if the image would support HDR, which means you have a brighter white in a way than in an SDR experience, that white text in front of an image may appear actually gray. So I believe that in PDF, we will want to not only cover images with HDR, we will also have to think about vector graphics and HDR, just to make the combination of vector graphics and images more vivid. But still, we could say we don't have, for that question, have to say we need to have HDR dictionaries and PDF structures in the PDF file. We could, for that, just rely on ICC profiles for that would then be associated with the vector graphics. And then for the subset standards, that the other question here, that is actually fairly easy. You have a PDF-A, PDF-X. There already is something like an output intent that specifies how this PDF is to be rendered, and then we could use the output intent to specify whether that PDF file should use HDR or whether it's being limited to SDR. And then the third part for the questions is CMYK, so the color space that is used by the printing devices. Do we need HDR for CMYK? As far as I know, not much work and thought has happened in that direction. I'm not fully sure, but that is what I believe. But we will have a presentation right after this one, I believe, where the whole topic is backlit printing, where you have a combination of a printed substrate, a printed thing in CMYK and with a backlit behind that then makes it illuminant, and that would actually be something for HDR. But let's wait for the next presentation there. So for us in PDF, the question really is, do we want to support CMYK with HDR? Is this backlit printing market important enough for that? And the other related question is, we always in PDF have to think about HDR or conversions from one color space to the other. So I've just mentioned you have an output intent ICC profile. So you always want to have a way from some HDR information to CMYK. And then if that happens, it has to be specified when and how that happens. And that is probably another aspect here. In PDF, you'll always have to make sure that there is this defined way from whatever HDR information is there back to a standard dynamic range, back to something that doesn't support HDR. And finally, the last question is probably the most complex one. In PDF, you have a broad support for transparency. So when we think about HDR in PDF, we also have to think about that. So how do we need to modify the transparency algorithms that calculate how objects interact with each other? What is the result color? If some object is transparent in front of the other, that needs to be adjusted to support HDR as well. And then, that has still to be specified. You have with transparency, you always have to have a blend color space where two objects are being converted into so that they can be processed in the same color space. And then it could happen that I have one object that uses HDR in front of, let's say, a CMYK image, and it needs to be specified how this object that is transparent and uses HDR is then be calculated with an object in the background. So if CMYK wouldn't support HDR, it needs to be specified whether and the CMYK object in the background, it would have to be specified how an HDR image using RGB in the foreground is then calculated. Okay. So as I've said, so these are just questions we need to answer before we can really say PDF support HDR. And then I wanted to close with a roadmap how that may happen in the future. So as I've said, we already have HDR in PDF in form of JPEG images. We currently have JPEG 1, JPEG 2000. We will have JPEG XL, all of which have support for HDR. And we have ICC profiles, again, with support for HDR. So probably a first step would be in PDF, just specify that information can be used when the PDF is being displayed. And that would already cover the case where I have an HEIC image or whatsoever that has HDR information, and then I save it as a PDF file. Then that PDF file would still be possible for the PDF file to be displayed on a monitor with headroom using that HDR information. But then for PDF, we can't stop there. So the next step would be to specify how HDR data structures are applied or can be applied to vector graphic and text. I've mentioned that already. So we will want to have that in PDF. And that means we have to think about the data, so the most important data structures here. So an adaptive gain curve and a gain map. There are places in PDF where where these could be stored. But yeah, things still have to be decided, and that is probably then one step in this short roadmap. And then finally, we will have to think about transparency, the different ways to have transparency in PDF, constant alpha, soft mask, and blend modes. And each of these has to be specified. For each of these, it has to be specified what it means in terms and for HDR. And then the other thing is you have always a blend color space where the two objects, background and foreground, are combined and converted into. Question is, can this blend color space also support HDR so that two images, for instance, both having HDR, can be transparently combined with each other? And that concludes my short overview of where we stand when it comes to HDR in PDF. Thank you so much.